Down is optional, up is mandatory. Those words are printed on a metal sign at the top of the Bright Angel Trail in Grand Canyon National Park, Arizona. They were put there by the National Park Service, and they are not a suggestion for your comfort. They are a warning that this trail is capable of killing you, and that it almost always kills not on the way down, but on the way back up, when your body has already burned through more resources than you realize. In June of 2026, an 18-year-old hiker set out on this trail with his father. They planned to hike down to the Colorado River and back in a single day. On the return climb, he collapsed, fell 30 feet below the trail near a place called Garden Creek, and a rescue helicopter that lifted him out within minutes could not save his life. To understand why this trail kills even young, physically fit people, you first need to see the scale of what they are walking into. The Grand Canyon is not simply a deep valley. It is a fracture in the Earth's crust up to 18 miles wide and 277 miles long, stretching across the entire northwestern corner of Arizona. If you place the Eiffel Tower at the bottom of the canyon, its tip would not reach even halfway up the walls. The Colorado River at the bottom has spent millions of years cutting its way through geological layers that are between 1 and 2 billion years old, and the dark, almost black rock that surrounds the river at the deepest point is some of the oldest exposed stone on the planet. When you stand on the south rim and look down, you can see the geological layers stacked like pages of a book. The top layer, pale Kaibab limestone, is about 270 million years old. As your eyes travel down the canyon walls, each band of color represents a different era, each one older than the last, until you reach the inner gorge where the Vishnu schist, nearly 2 billion years old, forms a dark, narrow corridor around the river. It is beautiful. Visitors describe it as one of the most visually stunning places on Earth. And that beauty is part of the problem, because it makes people want to go deeper. Every year, more than 4 million people visit this canyon, making the Grand Canyon one of the most visited national parks in America. And the vast majority of those who want to do more than just look from the edge choose the Bright Angel Trail. This trail begins right next to the hotel complex on the south rim, in a place called Grand Canyon Village. From the rim to the Colorado River at the bottom, it stretches for about 8 miles in one direction and drops 4,380 feet. That means the full round trip is roughly 16 miles with an elevation change comparable to climbing down from the top of the tallest skyscraper in Dubai to its base, and then climbing all the way back up again on foot. At first glance, the trail looks safe. It is wide, well-maintained, with guardrails on the upper sections. Along the route, there are 3 rest houses with water, and roughly halfway down, about 4.5 miles in, there is a stop called Havasupai Gardens, with restrooms, a campground, and drinking water from a pipeline. This is the most developed trail in the entire park, the one recommended for first-time visitors who want to descend into the canyon. And that is where the first trap lies. People who would never attempt a difficult technical mountaineering route without training casually walk onto this trail in sneakers, carrying a single bottle of water because the first mile looks like a paved walkway in a city park. They see a wide entrance, they see other tourists, they see signs marking the distances to each rest stop, and they decide, why not walk all the way to the river? Park rangers say that this exact decision, the desire to reach the very bottom and return in a single day, is behind the majority of rescue operations and deaths on this trail. Now here is the second trap, and it is far more dangerous than the first because it has nothing to do with the decisions people make and everything to do with the physics of the canyon itself. The Grand Canyon is built by nature as a giant oven. The canyon walls are made of dark, metamorphic rock that absorbs solar radiation throughout the day and then slowly radiates that heat back into the air around you. The deeper you descend, the narrower the canyon walls become, and the less chance the hot air has to rise and dissipate. The inner canyon functions like a vertical chimney that traps heat. Air is heated by rock on both sides, and instead of dispersing, that heat accumulates between the walls, creating temperatures far higher than what the thermometer reads on the canyon rim above. The specific numbers look like this. On the south rim, where you start your hike, summer air temperature might be 80 or 90 degrees Fahrenheit. That is warm, but perfectly manageable. At the bottom of the canyon, just a few hours of walking below, the air heats up to 105 degrees, 115 degrees, and on extreme heat days, it reaches 120 degrees. But that is only the air temperature. The surface of the trail itself, the rock beneath your feet, can be 20 to 30 degrees hotter than the official thermometer reading. You are literally walking on a surface hot enough to burn skin through the soles of your shoes, and that radiating heat is hitting you from below, in addition to the heat pressing down on you from every other direction. Think about what that means for your body. On a normal hot day in a city, you can step into shade and the air temperature drops. In the inner canyon, shade barely helps because the heat is not just coming from above. It is radiating from the walls on your left, from the walls on your right, and from the ground beneath you. Your body is being heated from every direction simultaneously, and the deeper you go, the more enclosed that heat becomes. Rangers describe it as hiking inside a toaster oven that someone forgot to turn off. Here is the first practical rule that rangers repeat every single day, and that most tourists ignore. Do not hike the inner canyon between 10 in the morning and 4 in the afternoon during summer months. This is not a recommendation for comfort. It is the threshold beyond which your body begins losing water and electrolytes faster than you can replenish them, even if you are carrying plenty of water. Rangers advise starting your hike before dawn, when the rock is still cool from the night air, and planning to be on your way back up well before midday. If you are reading this and thinking that sounds overly cautious, consider that the 18-year-old who died in June 2026 was found at 1:40 in the afternoon, right in the middle of that window that rangers tell you to avoid. Here's the second practical rule, and this one is counterintuitive. Drinking too much plain water without food or electrolytes can be just as deadly as not drinking at all. In 2008, a 47-year-old woman from London set out with her husband on a 6-mile hike along the neighboring South Kaibab Trail. It was a clear September day, not the hottest month of the year. Over 5 hours of hiking, she drank a large amount of water, but ate very little food. About an hour after finishing the hike, she fainted. Doctors found that the sodium level in her blood had dropped to a critically low point. This condition is called hyponatremia, or water intoxication. When you drink too much plain water without salt, the cells in your brain begin to swell, pressing against each other, and if the process is not stopped in time, it causes seizures, coma, and death. For this woman, help came too late. Park physician Dr. Thomas Myers later published her case in a medical journal as the first documented fatal case of hyponatremia in a wilderness setting. After this incident, Grand Canyon Rangers received equipment for immediate blood sodium testing and stocks of hypertonic saline solution. A 2013 study found that 19% of patients examined for suspected heat illness in Grand Canyon National Park actually showed signs of hyponatremia, meaning nearly 1 in 5 hikers who felt sick from the heat had actually been harmed by the opposite cause. Excessive water consumption without food and the standard treatment of administering more fluids could have made their condition worse. The practical takeaway is simple. Always carry not just water, but salty snacks, nuts, or an electrolyte mix, and drink only when you feel thirsty, not more. The trail that millions of tourists walk every year has a history older than the national park itself. The Havasupai people used the route along the Bright Angel Fault for centuries to descend to water sources deep within the canyon and to the Colorado River at the bottom. They lived in the side canyons, knew every shaded section and every spring by memory, and survived in this landscape not through equipment, but through knowledge of when to move and when to stop. In the late 1880s, prospectors arrived at the canyon rim. Among them was Ralph Cameron, an ambitious entrepreneur who, together with his partners, widened the trail to reach copper deposits deep inside the canyon. Early ore samples tested at an astounding 30% copper, and Cameron initially believed his fortune lay in the rocks. But he quickly realized that the real gold of the Grand Canyon was not copper, but tourists. Thousands of people were already arriving at the canyon rim by train, and every one of them wanted to descend. In 1903, Cameron erected a gate at the trailhead and began charging $1 per person, a considerable sum at the time. He also charged separately for drinking water and for the use of outhouses at the rest stop then called Indian Garden, now known as Havasupai Gardens. The trail became known as Cameron's Trail. He controlled 4 of the most strategic points along the route and through over 100 mining claims occupied the 13,000 acres of the most valuable land on the rim and inside the canyon. Understanding this history helps explain something about the present. This trail was never a neutral line on a map. It was always a resource that someone controlled and profited from. Cameron once boasted that he would make more money from the Grand Canyon than any other man. He leased a small piece of land near the trailhead to 2 brothers, Ellsworth and Emery Kolb, who set up a photography business there. The Kolbs would photograph tourists riding mules down the trail, then sprint 4.5 miles down to the only water source at Indian Garden, develop their film, and sprint 4.5 miles back up to the rim, all before the tourists returned. That daily run through the canyon, in the same heat that kills people today, gives you a sense of what this landscape demands from the human body. The competing Santa Fe Railroad built an alternative trail, the Hermit Trail. In 1911, specifically to bypass Cameron's Toll, the National Park Service built yet another, the South Kaibab Trail, in 1924 for the same reason. Finally, in 1928, after decades of legal battles, the county handed the trail over to the Park Service, and the toll was abolished forever. But here is a detail that matters for understanding the trail today. When the park took control, administrators seriously considered simply closing it. Because an alternative trail to the river already existed and maintaining 2 parallel routes was expensive. They decided to keep Bright Angel only because it provided access to the one reliable source of drinking water for the South Rim, Garden Creek. Over the following decade, crews from the Civilian Conservation Corps completely rebuilt the trail, detonating roughly 40,000 pounds of explosive powder to carve a new route through solid rock and widen it to a standard 4-foot width. The trail you walk today is not the trail the prospectors walked. It is wider, with a more uniform gradient and paved sections, and it still kills people. How regularly it does this is shown by the numbers. According to official National Park Service data released through a Freedom of Information Act request, between 2007 and 2023, there were 16 confirmed deaths from hypothermia, meaning critical overheating of the body, in Grand Canyon National Park alone. But the total number of deaths from all causes is much higher. By various estimates, the park loses an average of 15 to 17 visitors per year, including falls from cliffs, drownings in the river, cardiac arrests during the climb, and heat strokes. Some publications call the Grand Canyon the deadliest national park in America. More than 100 people have died here specifically from dehydration over the park's history, and the exact number is unknown because human remains are still discovered in the canyon that nobody knew were there. Notes left behind by some of these people have been found alongside their remains. One read simply, 4 days without food or water. In 2023, on the Bright Angel Trail and adjacent routes alone, the park's search and rescue service responded to 302 calls and assisted 455 hikers in a single season. At least 3 people died on Bright Angel that year. And then came June 2026. Within a single month, at least 4 people died from suspected heat illness in Grand Canyon National Park. On June 3rd, the 18-year-old from the opening of this story collapsed on Bright Angel. On June 12th, a 72-year-old man died on the South Kaibab Trail with symptoms of heat stroke. On June 16th, 2 more hikers, a 67-year-old man and a 68-year-old woman, died on the North Kaibab Trail. The park announced it was one of the deadliest Junes in recent years, and the National Weather Service issued an extreme heat warning with projected temperatures of up to 111 degrees Fahrenheit at Phantom Ranch at the canyon floor. Now that you see the scale of the danger in numbers, look at how the specific decisions that led to tragedy played out in the lives of real people. On June 2nd, 2022, a 41-year-old woman named Melanie Goodine traveled from Canada to hike the Bright Angel Trail. That day, the temperature at the bottom of the canyon reached 104 degrees Fahrenheit. Witnesses found her unconscious in the middle of the trail. Bystanders immediately began CPR. Park rangers joined them within minutes, but they could not revive her. She was not an inexperienced tourist who stumbled into the canyon by accident. She knew where she was going. But the canyon does not distinguish between experienced and inexperienced hikers. It only distinguishes between those who turned back in time and those who did not. Here is the decision that most likely cost her life: continuing to walk when her body was already sending the first signals of overheating. Every person who hikes this trail in the heat passes through a moment when the body starts saying enough. Dizziness, nausea, a dryness in the mouth that does not go away after a sip of water. Most people who survive this trail survive not because they are physically stronger, but because they listened to those signals and stopped. On May 21st, 2023, a 36-year-old woman from Westfield, Indiana, set out on a day hike from the rim to the river and back. She made it past the halfway point on the return climb, ascending toward the 3-mile rest house, when she became unresponsive. Rangers who received the call around 9 at night found that she had already stopped breathing. Pay attention to the time, 9 in the evening. That means she spent the majority of the day on the trail, including the hottest midday hours that rangers explicitly warn you to avoid. On November 16th, 2023, 65-year-old James Hanshai from a small town in Arizona set out on the same route, rim to river and back in a single day. He lived in Arizona, meaning he was theoretically acclimatized to desert heat. Somewhere on the return ascent, he lost consciousness and never recovered. November, not August, not the hottest month of the year. That is why this case matters. The canyon does not kill only in summer. The 4,000-foot elevation change means that even on a cool day at the rim, the temperature at the bottom can be 20 degrees higher, and the exertion of climbing back up with its cardiovascular strain and fluid loss can trigger a cardiac event or heat stroke, even in someone who has lived in the desert their entire life. On June 29th, 2024, 69-year-old Scott Sims from Texas was found semi-conscious at the very bottom of the canyon on the river trail, in the deepest and hottest part of the gorge. Bystanders began CPR immediately. Rescuers arrived as fast as the terrain allowed, but they could not save him. That same month, just days earlier, a 41-year-old man died on the Bright Angel Trail on his way up from an overnight stay. And then, on July 7th, a 50-year-old man from San Angelo, Texas, collapsed on the Bright Angel Trail. He had gone on an overnight trip to Havasupai Gardens and was making his way back up to the rim. He was 100 feet from the end of the trail. 100 feet, that is less than the length of a basketball court. He could see the rim. He could see the parking lot. He could see people walking around in the shade of the visitor center above him, and his body simply stopped. Bystanders rushed over and started CPR. Rangers arrived within minutes. It was not enough. The temperature that day reached 95 degrees on the rim, manageable by most standards, but rangers projected it topped 110 degrees at the canyon floor where he had spent the night. 3 deaths in 3 weeks, every one of them on the route that is marked as the safest in the entire park, and every one of them involving a person who had done nothing obviously reckless. Here is what keeps coming back to me about all of these cases. Not one of these people made a decision that, on its own, sounds unreasonable. A day hike, plenty of water, a well-marked trail. Each decision, taken individually, is something any of us would make. It is only the canyon that turns those ordinary decisions into fatal ones. And now, back to where this story began. On June 3rd, 2026, at approximately 1:40 in the afternoon, the Park Dispatch Center received a report of a hiker showing symptoms of heat stroke roughly 1 mile north of Havasupai Gardens. Rangers found the 18-year-old 30 feet below the trail in a hard-to-reach area near Garden Creek. He was alive when rescuers reached him, and he was evacuated by helicopter, but he could not be saved. Park spokesperson Joel Baird told journalists that the 30-foot fall alone did not explain the tragedy. Most likely heat stroke caused a loss of consciousness or a loss of coordination, a condition doctors call ataxia, and he fell while already in that state. He was hiking with his father. He knew the route. That morning, the temperature on the rim was perfectly manageable. But at the depth they had descended to, the air was already working against them. Every one of these people believed that morning that the route was within their abilities. Every one of them had a plan to return by evening. None of them set out on the trail intending to risk their life. The difference between them and the millions of tourists who successfully complete this same trail every year often comes down not to physical fitness or experience, but to one decision: whether to turn back before pride says you should, or to keep walking when your body is already sending its first alarm signals. The Havasupai people, who lived in this canyon for centuries, understood one simple rule: go down when the rock is still cold and never walk against the sun. They had no helicopters, no piped water stations, no radio contact with rescue teams. They had only their knowledge of the landscape, and it was enough. Today you have everything they did not: an accurate weather forecast for the canyon floor, updated hourly, electrolyte mixes that prevent water intoxication, and clear guidelines from rangers built on decades of rescue operations. But none of that equipment replaces the simplest decision you can make before you ever step onto the trail. The rangers did not put those words on the sign at the trailhead for decoration. Down really is optional. You can turn around at the first third of the route, at the halfway point, even 300 feet from the bottom of the canyon, and it will not be a defeat. But up really is mandatory. And that is why, before you step onto this trail, ask yourself honestly not whether you have the strength to reach the river, but whether you have the strength to climb back out under a sun that by then will have turned every stone beneath your feet into a radiator. If you do decide to go, here is what the people who survive this trail do differently from the people who do not. They carry at least a gallon of water per person, mixed with electrolyte powder or paired with salty snacks, because plain water alone can kill you just as surely as no water at all. They start before dawn, when the canyon rock is still cool and the temperature at the bottom has not yet climbed past tolerable. They plan to be on their way back up well before 10 in the morning, which means they accept that they might not reach the river, and they are at peace with that. And if somewhere on the return climb they feel dizzy, nauseous, or confused, they stop, find shade, and wait, even if it means sitting still for hours. Because the most valuable souvenir from this canyon is not a photograph at the bottom. It is your own ability to show that photograph to someone in person.